back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I'm joined by filmmaker Evan Santiago. Evan, how you doing today, man?
Good. How you doing today?
Dude, I'm doing so well. I'm so excited for this. This is something we've been trying to make happen for a long time. Evan is a writer and filmmaker who has been making films for over 10 years now. He makes stuff with no genres, but often finds himself coming back to the horror genre, being as that is his favorite. And right now, his dream is to be the writer of the next Nightmare on Elm Street movie. You can check out the pitch on Twitter, and I have that link right down here in the description. So make sure you're following him on Twitter. Make sure you're following him on all social media so you can see all the things that he has going on right now. So what can you tell us a little bit? Like I said, me and you connected through Twitter because of your love of A Nightmare on Elm Street, and obviously with that becomes your film that you're trying to get made. So obviously no spoilers. I don't want you to expose too much, but what can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's a story that I wrote. I wrote the script for it about 2 years ago because of I think it was the news that Robert Englund wanted to come back to play Freddy one more time. I think I remember reading that somewhere and being like, it'd be really cool if I just had a script in my back pocket, just something to have on me, just in case anything would come of it. And sure. I had no idea about the news about the estate, about Wes Craven's estate, until a couple of months later after I had finished the script. So I was lucky enough to have had finished this 126-page script. And to have the entire thing ready just in case I should ever want to pitch it anywhere. So when that news dropped, I thought, okay, I think it's time to start getting this pitch, to make a pitch and to start spreading it around and stuff. And that was the best that I thought I could do with my minimal resources and stuff.
Sure.
The actual story is, from the pitch itself, it's just talking about, it's just about this girl who, this little girl who basically is one of the children of the of the previous Elm Street kids, and the point is that all of those kids are now grown up, and now they have their own new generation of kids, and they sedate their kids with Hypnosil. And the point of that story is that there's no way for this new generation of kids to dream, and that actually creates more problems than you'd expect, and that's supposed to be the main thrust of the story.
Damn, I like that, man, because that's actually brilliant, because they lived through this. So using the Hypnosil as a way to kind of try to mind their own, ease their own mind of Freddy Krueger. If you can't dream, you can't bring him back. But I like that, man. I really do. I think that's actually it's almost ingenious, because you're taking something that the franchise has hinted at the whole time, but you're putting it in the forefront. And I love when people do that. Something that's been there all along. Let's bring that to the forefront and let's push that a little bit. So I think you got a good pitch, man. And like I said, after following you on Twitter and the conversations that we've had, I knew that I had to do this with you, man, because I think you're a genuine, nice guy. I love the ideas that you have, and I want to get them out there as much as I can. So I'm going to say this to you guys one more time. You don't have to go searching for his stuff because it's right down here in the description. So make sure you're throwing him a follow, because you're going to want to be a part of following this, because I really believe in my heart of hearts, something good is going to come of this, because the pitch is just too damn good. And if something's too damn good, it's too damn good. So now,
appreciate that. Thank you, Ken. Really.
Yeah, dude, no problem. Like I said, the minute we started conversing with each other, I was like, man, this guy, he's got a good head on his shoulders. He likes the horror genre. And the thing that I like about what you're doing it for the right reason. You're not like, man, I know that A Nightmare on Elm Street is a cash cow, so if I do something, I can make some money. You're doing this because of your genuine love of the franchise. And I feel like even if you look over at Vin DeSanti and Never Hike Alone, Never Hike in the Snow, the stuff that he does, or Peter Anthony, a good friend of mine, what he's doing with Roseblood, what these guys do with their fan films, those are fan films. But the thing I love the most about them, they're not doing it for the money at all. So their stories are far better than a lot of the sequels we've gotten from the studios, because of their genuine love of the creation of Friday the 13th, of Jason Voorhees, of Pamela Voorhees. Their genuine love of that has created these films that are so fucking awesome, and something that I'm such a huge fan of. I can't wait to see what you have to bring to us, man, because like I said, when you have someone that genuinely loves the product, they're going to give you something that we're going to love as fans, because you are going to be just as disappointed if it sucks as we do.
Yeah.
You're not waiting for that opening box office money and then you don't give a shit what happens after that.
Right.
This is something you genuinely care about, because this is the story that's coming from your heart, from something that you grew up with loving. So absolutely anything I can ever do to help support you, Evan, I am so down, because I love the ideas that you have, my friend.
Thank you. And I've always approached this as a fan first, just because it's all I know how to support. It's all I know how to approach this as. I've enjoyed these movies for years, since I was a kid. you know, they were pretty much my first horror movies, funny enough, which is which
the
is
reason
just,
we're here.
yeah, it's really it's the stuff that I grew up with, and it's the stuff that I understand the most, and it's a story that I'm really thematically attached to, and I think that's a big part of it. I think it's not just like the surface level stuff, which I really enjoy, and I think everybody really enjoys, you know, like the killer and the fun and the gore and all that stuff is a lot
And
of
the
fun.
sweater.
Yeah, no, you're looking good, man, looking good. And it's that, but it's also like the deeper stuff and the thematic stuff, and like especially now that as I've gotten older, I think I've really started to appreciate the like the stuff that the first movie was about, really, you know, about the parents and about the kids and about that disconnect, and you know, those things that weren't as important to me as a kid, but I realized as I got older were like really important to me, because you know, everybody's got, you know, different relationships with their parents, and there's all sorts of like different things that go into those relationships, and I think that that's really telling, especially in parts 1 and 3.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because Nightmare on Elm Street, you could see, has a lot of deep-rooted. I mean, as fantasy as it is, obviously it's horror fantasy with Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger, the best villain in my opinion of all time. But
Agreed.
aside from that, you can tell there's a lot of real personal deep shit that's going on behind the scenes of this movie, and the reason that Wes Craven wrote this film that he wrote. And I always say that Friday the 13th is my favorite franchise of the big three, but Freddy Krueger is my favorite villain because, one, he's scary as shit, and two, up until the remake, it was always the same guy. You know, when you had Jason, you had Michael, it was always them, but there was always someone different underneath that mask. But
Right.
Robert Englund was Freddy Krueger, and he took that and he ran with it, and his charisma and his personality makes the Nightmare on Elm Street movies the amazing movies that they are. I mean, even the bad ones, when you get to the Dream Child and Freddy's Dead, I can find entertainment in them because
100%.
of Robert Englund. You know, even if the story's bad, the side actors aren't that great, you root it towards the end. You're actually kind of rooting for Robert Englund because of how amazing his charisma is. I remember when I was young, man, they had like Freddy Krueger introducing an award on Nickelodeon, and I was like, this guy kills kids, and you have him delivering awards to kids at a kids show. So
he became such an icon.
Like,
that was the biggest thing about it. He became such an icon beyond the films, beyond what the subtext of the films were, and it almost becomes comical to see, like, outside of that world, like how much he's reached out to young people, especially, which is the funniest part, because like you said, he kills kids, and like it's young people and it's kids that like love Freddy Krueger so much, and like think that he's so like endearing and charismatic and fun.
And that's 100% Robert Englund right there.
Yeah.
You know, like, this is one of the things where I don't, and truly, I truly believe nobody else could have made Freddy Krueger the way he is now if it wasn't Robert Englund. You know, his personality, his charisma, like everything about him is just so infectious. And, you know, I've talked to people that were on set with him, and they said the same thing. Like, even behind the scenes, he is the most infectious, charismatic person. He's always there. He's working his ass off all the time. These movies meant so much to him because they were his babies too. So, but let's get into this, man. We know what you're doing in the future with the film, but that had to start somewhere. So we got to go back to the past. And this might surprise people what your first horror film was, because it was not A Nightmare on Elm Street. In fact, your first horror movie was
A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge.
Bam! Didn't see that coming. It's a twist. So the thing about Freddy's Revenge is I didn't start really appreciating this film until an adult. And it wasn't because of all the gay stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care about that. That has never, ever bothered me at all. I grew up with a gay uncle. I grew up with a gay cousin. I have some of my best friends who are gay. If you like, I've heard, I can't remember who it was that said it, but they said it perfectly. Every 80s horror slasher has titties all over the place. If you can't handle one movie with some man ass, that says more about you than it does about this film. So, but to me, I think it was just because of how dark, I mean, truly dark this movie is, because I had seen 3 and 4 before I had ever went back and seen 1 and 2. And so by the time I watched 2, I was just like, damn, like, this is fucking like scary Freddy Krueger. Like, this guy's a bad motherfucker in this movie. There's no joke cracking, none of that. Like, he's dark. And this whole movie is extremely dark. Do you remember how old you were the first time you had seen it?
I think I was about 5 years old. Yeah.
What an age to see this film, man.
Yeah, was not prepared for it. Was not. It's my dad was a big movie guy, and my parents were divorced, so I would end up going to visit my dad every other weekend, and he was a big movie guy. He was always showing us movies. He didn't care how old we were. He was just like, let's just watch something tonight.
Sure.
And he loved Nightmare on Elm Street. He liked horror movies, so he put on Nightmare on Elm Street Part Two. He had a VHS of it that I think he recorded from TV. It wasn't even like a store-bought VHS. He recorded it from TV on his VHS. And we watched the whole second movie, and it terrified me. It was a really scary movie for the same reasons that you said. It was probably one of the darkest chapters, so it was probably one of the most intense to start off on.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know. I just found myself getting really into it, and from subsequently after that, when it would be movie night with my dad, we would go to Blockbuster Video, and we would go looking for like specific Elm Street movies. We would see which ones they had, and that's where I got into watching Part One, and then Part Three, and then all the other ones after that. But Part Two was the one that started me on that. So,
and that's so cool, man, because I don't know, people that would just watch a couple of the live streams I've done on other channels, they may have just heard this, but I have a daughter. She's 8 years old, and she's high functioning autism, and she's never gotten into horror movies, man. But recently we've been having a Child's Play marathon. Child's Play is my favorite horror franchise, and we're watching all the movies in order, and she's getting so into it. And it's just like, hearing this about you and your dad, like that lasting impression that it can leave, the relationship with you and your father, like it just makes me, happy that I can give that to my kids too. Horror, like, yes, it is a dark genre. It's scary, it's bloody, it's gory, but there's so much love that goes into horror. We love it. And people that are true horror fans, it means so much to us. It's like a best friend, it's somebody that we care about. We love it. We would do anything for it. So to hear that it started with you and your father, even though, like I said, between Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and Wes Craven's New Nightmare, these are easily, to me, the darkest Freddy's of all the franchise. And to know that it started with your father, it's something so dark, I think is so awesome. Now, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 has one of my favorite scenes in all of A Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm not going to talk about that yet, because first, Evan, I want to know which scene it was that affected you the most from Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
yes. I would definitely say, and I would say that this affected me more on a creative level. I think that it was seeing Freddy burst out of Jesse's body in the I forgot exactly. I think it was after the party scene.
Right before the big party scene, when he's in the room with the guy.
Yes. When Freddy like makes his way out of Jesse's body, and that's amazing practical effect of Freddy's head coming through and slicing out open, and Freddy steps out. It was probably one of the most terrifying images I had ever seen, and just incredible special effects. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I think that the reason why it was my favorite for so long is because I think it was one of the scenes that got me into wanting to understand filmmaking, right, and to understand how people do that stuff behind the camera, because I genuinely could not fathom it at such a young age. I was like, what, how? But my dad would try and he would try and reassure me, like, oh, this is fake, this isn't real anyway, because it scared me so bad. And my question was, how is that possibly fake? How could that possibly have been faked? And so that was such a big part of my wanting to learn how to make movies. So
you're like, I watched him come out of him, Dad.
Yeah, that definitely happened.
Dude, I get it. And that's such an iconic scene, because I can't think of the guy's name right now. It's escaping me. But, he's trying to get out that door.
Yeah.
He's genuinely terrified of what he's watching too. And that kind of leads me into, so that's the scene that affected you the most. And I just talked to you about how one of my favorite scenes in the whole franchise is in this film. But first, I got to know, what is your favorite scene? We know which one affected you with Freddy coming out of Jesse. But in the whole movie, what would you say your favorite scene is from Nightmare 2?
Wow. It's so funny because I'm probably going to end up choosing one of the awake scenes, and I have a reason for that. But I really like this is so out there. It was the scene where Jesse was falling asleep in class, and a snake found its way around Jesse's neck. And it was so out there and weird. I remember seeing it for the first time and being like, this is not working for me. This is so strange. But every time I revisit the film, it becomes one of my favorite scenes because it subverts the dream aspect of it, where it's like we think he's dreaming, but it's really just someone pulling a prank on him and putting a snake around him or something like that. And it's I don't know. There's something about the awake scenes that really get me excited for the dream scenes. Like, and
Right.
so when it happens in a way where it's faking you out to make you think that it's a dream scene, I think that really gets me kind of like it interests me and excites me. So
When I think about this movie, because I think you're right, they do a lot of getting you prepared for the dream scenes with the awake scenes, but to watch Freddy at that pool and doing that whole massacre and killing, because you don't ever see that. You know, in this whole franchise, you don't get to see Freddy on a mass level like you did. So going back and rewatching this movie as an adult, like I said, it really blew my mind. Like watching that scene, like he's getting everybody in this, you know, like this is something where he's not just in someone's dream, he's out here now and he's running through everybody. And then obviously you got the iconic, "You are all my children now."
So good. So good. Been thinking about that's like one of the, and that line was an ad lib, I think, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that was probably one of the best ad libs in horror history, in my opinion. Like, just so good.
That's Robert Englund, man. Like in this one, you got the you know, "You're all my children now." In the Dream Warriors, the "Welcome to Primetime, bitch." Like that was totally Robert doing that. You know, like that's him. Like that's the energy that he brought to these films. But while we are on the subject of mass murder during a film, as fans of the horror genre, obviously we love the kills. It's something that we love. And you and I, you're a filmmaker. I'm a big fan for a long time. Practical effects are something that I appreciate very much. And in my opinion, Nightmare on Elm Street has always been great with its practical effects. That's why I wasn't such a huge fan of the remake. I don't think the remake is god awful, even though I poke at Justin all the time for it. Never mind. I changed my mind. That movie sucks, Justin. But the thing for me is all the CGI in that movie really, really bothers me because A Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one, is in my top 3 favorite practical effect movies of all time. I mean, you got the wall, you got Freddy's arms, like everything about that movie is fucking fantastic, and including the kills. So bringing me back to Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and the practical effects and the kills, what would you say your favorite kill from A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is?
That's tough. Because some of the kills in it are actually really good. I would jump to the one where Freddy jumps out of Jesse's body, but I do think that kill doesn't show as much. It's a kill through the door, so you get to see like the kill happen from the other side of the door. I think that the coach's death is pretty intense and pretty up there, like and they I wasn't even sure if they had Robert Englund for like half of that scene either. I'm pretty sure I remember reading or watching somewhere that they had a stunt double in a mask and a hat for like a little bit of that scene, but the actual atmosphere of the death scene was just so intense and so like the build up to it and getting the coach out of the equipment room and into the showers and the sports equipment flying everywhere. It's just this incredible, like insane buildup that just ended with like this incredibly cool prosthetic slash mark that happens on his back, which is so like visceral and neat looking.
And like I said, the practical effects from the Nightmare franchise have always been fantastic. It's something that, I think CGI can be useful. If you use it in the right way and you use it with your practical effects, I think CGI can be a hell of a tool.
Yeah.
But when you overdo it, it ruins it for me. So I think I know the answer to this, Evan, but I got to ask you anyway. We talked about your first horror movie, but now I got to throw a curveball at you. I'm going to go scream on you here for a second. What's your favorite scary movie? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Oh man. It's just going to sound, it's going to sound repetitive at this point because all we've been talking is Elm Street, but I think it would probably be something between the first Elm Street movie and New Nightmare. I think I get kind of, I go between the two of them because I think they've both affected me and have had an impact on me long after I first saw them. Like I saw them for the first time when I was really young, and I revisit them the most. They're the horror films that I find myself going back to, and they're my favorite for that reason, that they just honestly have that effect, and I'm able to come back to them a lot. I cannot pick between those two though. That is a really tough one.
And that sucks because my next question is going to really bum me out. Since we're talking about a franchise, I always have to ask, which is your favorite film in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise? You're getting sent to an island, man. You have a Blu-ray player, you have a TV, and you get to take one Blu-ray with you of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise or VHS. That's what I would choose. I'm going VHS. I like to do a little bit of the tracking every now and then. What is your favorite film in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, Evan?
Okay, I can do this. If I had to choose between the first one and New Nightmare, I would probably say New Nightmare. And the reason for it is because I think that New Nightmare would have been, if not for all the films in the series that came after that, if not for Freddy versus Jason, and if not for the remake, the perfect send-off to Freddy Krueger. It would have been the perfect ending. It would have been, because I've said this before, that I think that it was Wes Craven basically coming back to right the wrongs, or like to fix his baby, to kind of come back and to get back to work on his on what was originally his project. So it felt like an ending. It felt like a definitive ending, even if it wasn't part of the main series. It was like more meta and more out there and all that stuff. Well, but I like New Nightmare is the ending of Freddy Krueger to me. And it's the only reason why I even feel justified at all in wanting to continue Elm Street in my pitch and all that stuff is because there were movies after New Nightmare. If New Nightmare was the last Freddy movie that had come out, I probably wouldn't even bother with my pitch or bother with any of this stuff because
I can tell you this, man. Wes Craven's New Nightmare changed the landscape of horror forever. And people could come to me and say, oh man, that movie's not very good, but hold on, slow down a minute. For one, yes, it fucking is. It's fucking great. And for two, and I say this as a person who is Scream is my third favorite horror franchise of all time. Without Wes Craven's New Nightmare, Scream doesn't exist.
I agree with that.
Wes Craven's New Nightmare was his shot into meta. And when he's seen how well it worked, he was able to create Scream afterwards. And when he created Scream, he completely revitalized the horror genre. So without Wes Craven's New Nightmare, we don't have Scream. And without Scream, who knows where especially the slasher genre is today. You look at and I want everybody to do this if you don't believe me. Look at the horror movies that came out 3 years before Scream and 3 years after. And you tell me that Scream did not put a shot in the arm into the horror genre at a time when especially slashers were absolutely dying. Scream comes along and completely saves horror. Whether you love Scream or you hate Scream, you can't deny it. I mean, Scream was so huge. Halloween even made an attempt at it with Halloween H2O, which I think is brilliant. I love that movie. But without Scream, you don't get Halloween H2O, and so on and so forth. So Wes Craven's New Nightmare really was the pinnacle to creating the meta horror that we all love today. So I will go to bat with you about Wes Craven's New Nightmare all day. I think Wes Craven's New Nightmare is a fantastic film. I think that, like you were saying, one of my favorite deaths in the Nightmare franchise is with Rod and Tina. When Tina's getting dragged up the wall and Rod, Tina! And they totally redo that kill in New Nightmare. But in this one, you get to see Freddy dragging her up the wall in the hospital. And I think that is such an epic throwback to that kill because you never see Freddy throughout the first one because the makeup was so bad. And people, I don't know if they know this or not. I've talked about it on the podcast before. Freddy Krueger was in A Nightmare on Elm Street for, I think, 7 to 9 minutes. That's all the screen time he had.
Fairly sure it was 7 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, because of the amount of practical effects and makeup it took. They didn't want him to look different from scene to scene, so they didn't show him very often. With Wes Craven's New Nightmare, they had to budget to be able to do stuff like that. So to show some scenes where she's getting dragged without him and other scenes where he's dragging her up that wall, fucking brilliant, man. And Wes Craven, God rest his soul, we'll never get another one like him, man. Him and John Carpenter, Stephen King, these guys are in a league of their own. And we got new guys nowadays like Mike Flanagan that are out here killing it. But I respect a lot of the horror writers and directors today, but those guys are just on another level, man. And I am so honored and so proud to be a part of a genre that is so highly respected because of men like that. Evan, this has been a blast for me, man, and getting to know you has been great. But we always end this with the same question, my friend. We're going back to A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Now we're going to rank this on a skull count. 0 skulls being the worst and 5 being the best. But there is a catch here. We're not ranking this based on production, acting, quality. We're not being critics right now. We are ranking this based on what this movie means to you and how much this movie affected you. So Nightmare on Elm Street 2, 0 being the worst, 5 being the best. And you can use, I don't think we're going to need to, half and quarter skulls. What would your ranking of Nightmare on Elm Street 2 be, my friend?
I think just based on everything, based on its impact, based on like how it shaped my childhood and how it shaped my filmmaking career, so to speak, and how much I care about all these movies and stuff, I'm going to give it 5 skulls.
Got to. I was waiting for you to be like, I give it this many.
Just infinite skulls.
And I agree with you, man. And it's funny because I was just talking about this with a good friend of mine, Gory Bits on YouTube. He's a good friend of mine. And when we talk about our first horror movie or horror movies that mean a lot to us, we're not just talking about the movie. You know, we and him were talking about the original Friday the 13th. And he's like, man, when I talk about it and my first time watching it, I literally get rewound back to that moment in my life. And I remember eating taquitos for the first time while I was watching that movie. We remember the people we were with. We remember the smells. We remember the conversation. We remember the food we were eating. And I don't remember what the first comedy I watched was or the first sci-fi. I'm pretty sure the first sci-fi was probably either Terminator 2 or Star Wars, somewhere in that area. But I know House from 1986 was my first horror movie. I know that because of the adrenaline that I got while I was watching it. And that's carried with me like a roller coaster. Every horror movie I watch, I'm wanting to get that high again and that adrenaline of being scared. And, you know, again, I'm sorry for repeat viewers that hear me say this all the time, but we don't get rom-com con. You know, you don't get people dressing up like Ryan Gosling and going and flinging their girlfriends around in a convention center. You don't get that, but we get horror con because that's what these people mean to us. And they can be some of the scariest or stupidest or prettiest or, you know, whatever on screen, but then you meet them and they're the most down-to-earth, wonderful, kind human beings that are so graceful and so grateful for all the love they get. I've never met a person in the horror community that was too high on themselves to come and talk to me or too full of themselves to give me a conversation. Like, that's how down-to-earth and amazing and kind they are. And you would fit in perfectly in that world, man. So I'm so excited to see where your pitch goes. We are at the end here now, my friends. So everybody else, I do want to remind you one more time, links in the description. You're going to want to follow this cat. He's got a good head on his shoulders when it comes to horror because he genuinely loves and cares about it. So don't go anywhere, Evan. I got a couple more questions for you, my friend. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.